Hello, everyone. Welcome to FS Changemakers, which is our weekly property where we talk to amazing women who are doing amazing work in their own fields. Today, we are joined by Shivani Dhillon. Shivani is an ex-journalist. She spent close to 9 years working with BBC, Z News, and Aaj Tak. Today, it's a role reversal of sorts where I'll be the one who will be interviewing her. After her stint as a journalist, she's been pretty active in the Down syndrome community in India, where she's been running an online support group for parents who have children with Down syndrome. And of late, she's been doing online storytelling workshops as well. It'll be a fun conversation. Shivani, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Adarsh. Thanks for having me. And it's great to speak to you after so many years as well.
Yes, for the others who don't know, I actually worked with Shivani for a brief period while I was running my own startup, and she was kind enough to help me in putting together a calendar where we had, some amazing artwork done by children with special abilities, in the form of a calendar, and I think it was a great experience, at least for me personally.
No, it was a great platform. I mean, children were happy because that was a great way to showcase what their talent is really. So that was brilliant.
Cool, cool. So you started working at the age of 19. How was that experience like? And in retrospect, do you feel that it was a bit too early and probably if you had started a bit late, it might have been better for you?
Well, I think it just came by chance. I mean, it wasn't like I was a very ambitious person and, like I wanted a huge career. But I was still in the middle of my graduation, and Z News was kind of looking for news anchors and people to, star in their production houses, all their soaps, which were starting at the same time. This is 1999. And I came from a middle class family where my parents said that, we'll allow you to go for the news anchor, allow you to go to Bombay. News anchors were supposed to be a very respectable job, and nobody needed a mass communication in those days. So I went ahead. The interviews happened here in Chandigarh, 3 rounds, and well, I was selected, and I was 19 and a half. And I moved to Z, and I moved to Noida all by myself. No regrets, actually, because I learned so much on the job. It was so naive and so fresh, and so we hadn't seen the outside world. So it was fun, and we met some wonderful people. I mean, I must say that I met people who helped me to progress in my career, in my profession. There was never a time where I felt that this was a big bang or anything. So a wonderful experience, yeah.
Great, great. So Shivani, one thing interesting that I noticed is that you worked with Aaj Tak when the channel was just starting out, right? And whereas both Z News and BBC at some level were still established names, right? So how was that experience like working for a startup channel versus more established names? Was it any different?
Not in those times, no. From Z to Aaj Tak wasn't much of a difference because, see, Z was an established channel, but it was the only channel. It was the
Right.
only news channel apart from Doordarshan, private. And Aaj Tak, we had heard of the news, but it not as a 24-hour channel. So they were more open to new things than Z was, slightly more open. And we were fresh. We were picked up from Z, and so yeah, I mean, Aaj Tak was a bit different in the sense that they were more open to new things, doing new programs. They were focused on metros as well, not just the national news. So that was a bit of a change from Z to Aaj Tak. But uh, people were more or less the same. Journalism wasn't a huge field at that time.
Sure. So you spent 8 or 9 years in the media industry in India and then in the UK. What made you quit and on to the next phase of your life?
So Z and Aaj Tak, we worked very long hours. There was early morning shifts. We had to be in office by 3:30 in the morning, very late nights, and we were young. So timings were never an issue for us. No family or anything. So we worked long hours, but that kind of took the energy out of us. Um, uh, I mean, 4 years with Z News kind of sucked out my energy, and I wanted a break. I really wanted a break, and I'd only done my graduation. And you're a middle class family, your parents, kind of want more than graduation. So my dad always told me, "Kuch or just have another degree on your resume." So I said, why not a change of place as well? So I decided to go abroad, and that's why I moved to London to pursue my master's degree. And when I reached there, immediately within a month, I joined the BBC there because I already had some experience. So on a student visa, you could only work for a stipulated 16 hours per week session. So, and we had to earn and study all of that. So yeah, I made the opportunity, but it was other. BBC was radio, and I had always worked with visuals, so it was a complete contrast and a challenge initially, because everything is about the voice and about the sounds and about what you write, the words that you choose. So it was a different experience, yes.
And then what made you quit BBC and then decide to come back to India?
BBC, I worked, I used to travel, and then I got married, and I had our firstborn. He's now 14 nearly. When he was born, he wasn't a very well child. He was quite ill. He had a severe skin condition, and he used to stay awake a lot at night. I had to travel, and I remember my last travel, I came from London with him, and I went to Bombay for a documentary, and I went home in Chandigarh. It was just 3 days, and when I came back, I saw his skin had all flared up, and in his eyes and his face, and I decided I'm not going to do this anymore. So I went back, and he was nearly a year old. I went back, I finished my documentary, and I put in my papers, and I said, I can't work because he needs me. And I wouldn't sleep at night and going back to work. And he was considered like a special, even though he wasn't a special needs child, but his needs were so severe and so much at that point of time.
And then what led to the decision of moving back to India? Because here you just quit your job, right? Then eventually you moved back. Yeah.
So we this was 2007 when Aviraj was born, and following into 2010 we had our second born, Shreya, and Shreya was diagnosed with Down syndrome. We were in the UK at that point of time, and our first 1 year was very difficult because we were in and out of therapies. We ourselves as parents were trying to understand what exactly is the diagnosis, what to expect really in the years, and how best to take care of her. She had some health concerns as well. And as the year progressed, my husband was working, I was still at home. And I realized that my daughter was only speaking to the three of us during the week. Not even the three of us. I mean, by the time my husband returned from work, she would be asleep by 8. And it was only on the weekend that we socialized. So abroad, you don't socialize during the weekdays. You just see each other on the weekends. And I said, I mean, compare this situation to India. You're surrounded by people. That's what India is all about. I mean, you coming in and out of your house. Kabhi dhobi wala aa gaya, kabhi safai wali aa gaye, and so many people walking in and out. And I said, that's something that Shreya really needs right now. And we just we decided today, others, and within 25 days we were in India. That's how we moved. And I really have no regrets because I had my side of the family here, my husband's side of the family. We live in a joint family. And that has been such a great boon for her because she would interact with so many people. It helped her speech abilities, it helped her overall development. So very happy to have moved back. And I know a lot of people still asking, especially special parents actually trying to move out of India. So, I move back, you should have stayed there. And then I have to explain that sometimes, you really have to weigh the positive and the negatives. And it's not so bad in India after all.
Great. So Shivani, before the move to India happened, right? So you mentioned that both your kids had some special needs while growing up. So how did you deal with it emotionally? Did you ever feel, why me? Because both the kids had their own special needs early on.
So with the older one, I think it was all very new. I was a first time mom. I was dealing with, apart from the fact that we were a parent now, I was a mother now. That was uh, that wasn't so difficult, but I think physical challenge of dealing with Aviraj was very, very tough, because sleepless nights, scratch. He had, I remember we had to make him wear wet clothing, a special type of clothing, just to keep the moisture in his skin intact. And I had to spray water on it every 3 hours, putting cream on him for 3 hours. So it was very physically exhausting. And so, I mean, I never said why me, because I think that, so I think on some level, I believe maybe I was spiritually inclined. It's a very cliched word now, but I used to pray. I mean, I do pray a lot, and that helped me. My prayers helped me deal with it. But when Shreya was born, I remember that it was the moment that the doctor first mentioned this to us. I always knew, Adarsh, that there was a risk, actually. The doctors had mentioned to us in the UK, and there were tests that were in place to give us a 100% surety of whether it is there or not. But I think it was a conscious decision that we took. We want to have our baby, irrespective of what the baby has, the diagnosis. I mean, it's still she's still our child. And so we decided to go ahead with it. Confirmation after she was born. I think that was probably the only time that I remember shedding a few tears. And I quickly, gathered myself, and I, Googled everything, and, all of that happened. And of course, it took time. Deep down, it took a little bit of time. But the acceptance came very early, which I think helped me to deal with it. And I think it helped my daughter as well to develop, because the longer the parent is struggling to accept the diagnosis, the child is suffering as well, right? Because you're not able to give your 100% to the child. Yeah. So it was emotionally a roller coaster initially, but you don't have any option, really, do you? You have to accept, and you have got to move on. Yes.
Makes sense. So Shivani, how were the early days being back in India, right? So you mentioned that there was the entire family structure, but at the same time, the amount of awareness with regards to intellectual disabilities or Down syndrome, especially 10 years back, would have been, much lesser than what it is today, and it's not very high right now either. So how were those early days, and then what led to you setting up the entire, online help group for all the parents, etc.?
So when we moved back, when we were in England, you're very pampered, right? So I remember going to my doctor in the first I would ask is, how are you feeling, Shivani? And then she would come to Shreya. So my well-being, my emotional well-being was equally important. And we were thrown into the deep end when we moved to India. We didn't know anything. Nothing was online. I mean, nothing was online those days. Remember, and I started going to each and every doctor. So I would choose a new pediatrician every time. I would leave my number, and I would say that, if you know a pet, please share my number. This was all private. Then I started going to the big hospital. I did was I printed out lots of info leaflets in 3 languages: English, Hindi, and Punjabi. And because I read and write all 3. And I wrote my note at the end. I said, contact me, need help, or because I was equally wanting help. It wasn't like I was so ready to provide that help and support. I was looking for it as well. And I left it in all the departments where I knew children with Down syndrome need to go. And I remember I started getting calls. And I remember my first call from a parent. And of course, we are still very good friends, but that started the online platform. I realized with my friend, with that particular parent, of how important support is for each other. Online seemed to be the best platform because people were Google and people were putting in, asking for information from Google, and nothing was there. So that's how this whole page kind of started up.
So Shivani, as you know that, I've done a bit of work, not a lot, in the intellectual disability space. And one thing as an outsider, I always found a bit intriguing was that within the community as well, there is a lot of conflict, I would say, difference of opinion with regards to what are the right words to use, whether to call special abilities, intellectual disabilities, and and so on. For an outsider, how do you make sure that you are not hurting someone, while not meaning to? Because like there is so much difference of opinion on what's right, what's wrong.
Very interesting question, and I have struggled with this answer with some of my fellow travelers, as I call them. For the term is not important. I cannot negate the fact that my daughter has a disability. I call it differently abled, diverse needs, challenge, or a mental disability. That doesn't change the struggle, the challenges that I and she are facing on a daily basis. The problem have is, the which is not coming from the society. First struggling with that acceptance. Acceptance will only come when we project our child to be either differently abled or talented, or having different types of talents. But the moment we will are able to do X, Y, Z, there is a fear of not being accepted. See, anyone is not being accepted by this society, right? They're not being included to the mainstream. It's only, कहने की बात है कि mainstream inclusion है. There isn't that much inclusion on the surface. Deep down, there still isn't. So we feel very scared that if we start talking about our challenges and the actual disability that our child faces, maybe they won't be accepted at all. So that's why I think the parents kind of get so involved in the right kind of terms that can be used, but they are not what we call the neurotypical. They are not. I mean, you and I may be challenged in small things which doesn't interfere with our normal lives. But children with special needs, children with intellectual disabilities, face challenges every day. The sounds affect you, right? Not just the sound, the textures of things can affect you. You can't have an eye contact to talk to people. I mean, I'm talking about different types of disabilities. With Down syndrome, my daughter may have problems in running for more than 5 minutes if she had to. Understanding if there's too much of information overload, she goes blank, right? She may not be able to write because she doesn't have strong muscles in her hands. These are challenges. This is a disability, no matter what terminology you may use. And I know that every other day I see a new term being used. You're called. I remember Disability Day last year in December, and instead of disability, a lot of people were slashing the dis and writing ability only. I think this we do for ourselves as others. We want to feel good. There's a little things that we want to comfort ourselves with as parents. But it doesn't matter because the challenges are there.
So, Shivani, as you mentioned, there are obviously a lot of challenges, and it takes a lot of faith and love to be able to go through these challenges. What keeps you motivated and optimistic? Because whenever I've seen you, you're smiling. You're a happy person. How do you achieve that?
So a very important thing for me personally has been my personal growth after Shreya. So a lot of things don't matter anymore. I look at the things that were very trivial before are the things that bring joy to me now. Shreya understood my one sentence today. That is like, wow. Or Shreya understood the 3-step instructions that I gave her today. Okay, wow. The other day she asked me, what's the meaning of her name? I mean, I was thrilled to no end, that she was able to understand and ask that question. So I was really thrilled. So these are the little joys. So we've come to a point where we find joy and happiness very things in life. And it's Shreya who keeps us going, as a family. I mean, she's so affectionate. I mean, there's no malice in her. There's never going to be any malice in her heart. They are so pure. And also she has pushed me to connect more with the higher, the dimension, the universe, God, or whatever we may call it. But so that connection has grown stronger with Shreya because of her. So that's what keeps us going.
And that's so amazing to hear. So Shivani, coming to the latest chapter of your life, right? You're now portly auntie to all the kids, where you're doing storytelling sessions. How did this start, and how's the experience been?
So lockdown was difficult for us because to close down our business, so our only source of income. But there's always, we don't understand the planning that happens right above, right? We never know what's being planned for us. But in the lockdown, while the business had shut down completely, the only source of our income had shut down. I started doing a lot of videos during lockdown. This was again mainly for parents who got children with special needs. I would share a lot of anecdotes from my life, my own experiences, and I started getting good response. Parents started connecting to what I was talking about, and then I don't know, from suddenly from there, while I was telling stories of my own life, from my own life, I don't know, just kind of door to telling stories to children as well. Somebody contacted me, another parent, and she said, let's do some stories. I said, all right. Another friend said, let's do some workshops on traditional art and craft. I said, yeah, let's do that. Let's do it with a story, with a folk tale. And before I knew it, this was July, and before I knew it, I was working with 3 NGOs. I was doing sessions. I was working with children's websites, and I saw the impact, Adarsh, it has on children and young adults with intellectual disabilities. They had been so we heard all kinds. Some parents, their children had really benefited from the lockdown, having parents around all the time. I heard from other parents who said that lockdown had been very difficult because there was lack of exercise. Children were not leaving the house. They were getting very frustrated. But storytelling was therapy, and yet it was a lot of fun. It was a interaction. I'm very music and singing, so we use that as well in our stories. And they started connecting. They started expressing. They started understanding emotion. They started understanding difference between feelings and emotions. And how to express themselves. So it just happened by fluke. I mean, there was a solid plan behind it, which I didn't know. But I'm very happy. I think I've found my true calling, as they say. It very happy. I had always used stories with my daughter, Adarsh. Whenever I had a challenge with her behavior, I would change that into a story. And I would see her eyes focused on me, and she was intently listening to me. And I would see a change right after maybe telling the same story twice. So I used the same concept with children who had diverse needs again. And it worked very well.
That's amazing. Always in challenges, we find new opportunities, and sometimes that's all that life wants us to find. So there are a few questions that we have from the audience. So I'll be taking those now. So we have the first one from Ojaswi, where she's asked, what is the positive impact your experiences have had on your life, or the way you look at society in general?
So I don't have any ill feelings towards the society at large, even though I feel a lack of compassion, a lack of empathy sometimes. But I think that stems from ignorance. I think maybe if I never had a daughter with Down syndrome, I wouldn't have been so involved in the cause as well. And I wouldn't have known what it means when you find a child banging his head in a mall. It's this frustration that the child has for not being able to communicate his thoughts. So I do feel that the society needs to be more open to accepting our children. The other parents who have children with neurotypical children, they feel that there'll be some bad impact, there'll be some bad influence. It doesn't happen. Your child would be a human being once they start interacting with children who've got diverse needs. So that's for the society. But I think in general, as a person, I have changed, yes, 360 degrees, completely after Shreya. I've become more humble. I've become more accepting. I take one day at a time, definitely as it comes. So yeah, and like I said, she's connected me to something much more higher now. Yes.
So the second question that we have is from Ashish, and he says, "How did you get the name Potli Auntie, and what does it mean to you?"
Okay, so when I started working with a friend of mine who has a company many years back called Potli, a Bag of Wonders, and she focuses on Indian traditional art and craft. And when I started working with her, I said, we had to come up with a name. I was teaching traditional Indian art and craft, from different states, and I would weave a story into it, and that's how I would teach. So I said, I need a name. That's how Potli actually came. So I'm Potli Auntie. I come with a whole Potli full of stories, but that's not the name that I'm, known by Miss Jibber Jabber because I talk so much. Some children who find Jibber Jabber a little difficult to pronounce, they call me Shivani Auntie. All ages call me Shivani Auntie. I have 40-year-old people with disability also calling me Shivani Auntie. So I think first time I'm loving being called Auntie in my life. Yeah, so these are just kids calling me with different names. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, Shivani, that's it in terms of all the questions that we had with regard to you specifically and the work that you do. But before we end, we'll like to do a quick rapid fire. So these are three standard questions that we ask in every interview that we do. What are your top 5 wardrobe staples that you need to have at all times?
Linen shirts, kurtas, cotton trousers, cotton pants, straight pants, and jeans. Yes, wouldn't do anything without jeans.
Cool. Who are the 3 Indian women you look up to, and preferably alive?
Say Sudha Murthy. Well, I have my mom. I can't forget her. My mom, my great support, and my grandmother as well. My grandmother, because she would tell us so many stories, and that's how this whole the seed of storytelling was put inside me.
Cool. So the final question, what message would you like to give to the audience out there? Because we'll probably be talking to a lot of people who don't have enough context about Down syndrome. Anything in particular you would like to take them away from this conversation, or anything else that you would like to share with people?
So Down syndrome is not a disease. It's not a disease that people who are living with Down syndrome are not suffering. So it's not a disease. It's a condition. It's a part of them, part of their identity. It's who they are. And only want what you want. Just love, acceptance. Some to just stop and pause for just one moment and say hello to them. They don't want too much of your time. They really don't want anything, just want you to say hello and smile. And not the moment you think in your heart, what's wrong with them? They instantly grab that. Give them love. And also surround your young ones with stories, because stories is something that it's like a doorway to something. And not just children, I think grown-ups, you and me also need that from time to time. So that's what I would like to say. Yes. Both of these things are important to me in my life. Yeah.
Thank you, Shivani. It has been such a pleasure talking to you after a long time. But it was phenomenal. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Adarsh. Thanks a lot.